Today, we're diving into this really fascinating connection between, divine gifts and actual human development. And we're going to ask a pretty critical question. Why is it that some incredibly gifted leaders build legacies that last for thousands of years, while others, well, they're pretty much forgotten within a single generation?
It's a real puzzle, and it has some huge implications for all of us. I mean, you've seen this happen, right? Someone with just raw, incredible talent makes a massive impact, but then, almost overnight, that influence just vanishes. So what's the missing ingredient? What does it take to build a legacy that truly lasts?
So to figure this out, let's look at two biblical heavyweights. On one side, you've got Joseph. His gift for interpretation literally saved Egypt from a massive famine. Incredible, right? And on the other, you have Daniel, who had a similar gift, advising kings and interpreting their dreams. Both were just off the charts gifted, but their legacies, they couldn't be more different. And understanding why, well, that's the key to this whole thing.
Okay, so let's start with Joseph's story, because it's a real mystery. His is one of the most dramatic, rags-to-riches stories you can imagine, but it ends with this shocking twist.
Get this, at just 30 years old, Joseph becomes the prime minister of the most powerful empire in the world. He comes up with a plan that saves millions from starvation, and he holds that power for 80 years. And yet, the second he's gone, his entire legacy just evaporates. I mean, how is that even possible?
Well, the answer is right here in this one single chilling verse. A new pharaoh takes the throne, and he has no idea who Joseph even was. Think about that. Joseph's influence was so tied to his personal, charismatic gift that it was never baked into the system, into the laws or the culture of Egypt. So when he was gone, his impact was gone too. It was a gift-dependent legacy, and because of that, it just didn't last.
And this brings us to a really crucial point, something that helps explain this whole Joseph tragedy. In a lot of spiritual circles, there's this subtle, unspoken belief that you have to choose between developing your divine gifts and pursuing your intellectual growth. And that, right there, is a really dangerous false choice.
We can call this idea the false dichotomy. It's this mistaken belief that spiritual passion and intellectual rigor are somehow enemies. It's this assumption that if you're led by the Spirit, then you don't really need to bother with serious, intentional learning or skill development.
And the consequences of thinking that way are pretty severe. This false choice creates weakness on both sides. You end up with deeply spiritual people who are super vulnerable to false teaching because they haven't developed critical thinking. And on the flip side, you get brilliant scholars who lack any kind of spiritual vitality. But the biggest consequence is exactly what we saw with Joseph. Influence that's powerful for a moment, but is ultimately unsustainable.
So if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, let's shift gears and look at what we're calling the integration model. We're going to look at 3 people who prove that when you combine divine gifts with intentional education, you create an influence that can echo for thousands of years.
First up, Moses. Now, God didn't just give him a divine calling out of the blue. No, he leveraged Moses' world-class Egyptian education. All that training in law and administration, that gave Moses the actual practical tools he needed to receive the 10 Commandments and then build the entire legal framework for a brand new nation.
And then we've got Daniel. Just listen to the words used to describe him. It wasn't just about his gift of interpretation. He had knowledge, understanding, and the ability to solve really complex problems. Why? Because he went through 3 years of intensive Babylonian training. That competence, that skill is what made his spiritual gift sustainable for over 70 years through multiple kings and regimes.
And finally, the Apostle Paul. I love this quote because even his contemporary, Peter, basically admits, hey, the stuff Paul writes is profound, and sometimes it's really hard to understand. Paul's incredible education allowed him to articulate deep, complex divine truths in a way that others simply couldn't. His mind was a vessel that had been prepared for the sheer weight of the theology he was meant to deliver.
Okay, now this is where it gets really, really compelling. The difference between a gift-only approach and an integrated one, it's not just a nice theory. You can actually see it. You can measure it in the data. Just look at this chart. It's stunning. Peter and John literally walked with Jesus for 3 years. They were eyewitnesses to everything. And yet, the highly educated Paul, who never even met Jesus in the flesh, wrote almost 2/3 of the New Testament. Now, this isn't a knock on Peter or John at all. It's just a powerful illustration of how intellectual development can amplify your ability to articulate God's truth to the world.
This table right here, this just lays it all out.
Joseph, relying on his gift alone, gets a legacy of about 1 generation and leaves behind 0 written record. But then you look at Moses, Daniel, and Paul. They all combine their gifts with education, and look at the result. Their influence wasn't just long-lasting, it was written down, it was codified, shaping civilizations for millennia.
I mean, just stop and think about that number for a second. Over 3,500 years later, the legal and moral frameworks that Moses established, thanks to that powerful combination of his divine gift and his world-class education, are still foundational to societies all around the globe. Now that is the power of a legacy that's built on more than just a fleeting gift.
So, what does all this mean for us today? This isn't just a cool history lesson, it's a powerful model for living. How do we take this ancient wisdom and actually apply it to our own lives?
What these incredible stories show us is a both-and approach. See, it's not a choice between spiritual gifts or intellectual growth. It's about divine gifting and intentional development. One without the other creates a really unstable foundation. But when you put them together, that's how you create a legacy that can last long after you're gone.
So here's a really simple challenge to put this into practice right away. For the next 30 days, just pick one small step to grow intellectually. Maybe read a challenging book or sign up for an online course. And at the exact same time, pick one spiritual discipline to go deeper in, like prayer or intentional study. Just try it, embrace the both and see what happens.
And I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. What would happen if you combined your unique, God-given gifts with a serious, intentional commitment to learning and excellence? What would a lasting, Daniel-like influence look like in your family, in your career, in your community? The potential there, it's absolutely extraordinary.